Welcome. In this video, I would like to return to the topic of academic honesty. But specifically, I'd like to address plagiarism, its definition, and then offer a few examples of student writing that I've observed that I consider plagiarized. I think plagiarism is the misuse of someone else's words or ideas without giving attribution to the source of the information. The information could be words, videos, audio recordings, graphic images. In general, to demonstrate academic honesty, one needs to identify the source of information that is presented in a paper. I should clarify, when I say someone else's words or ideas, it doesn't have to be a person who needs to be credited for the information. It could be an entity, such as an organization. Whenever information is acquired and then used in an academic paper, the source of that information needs to be credited, not just for rhetorical purposes, not just because it helps defend formally claims that are made within the paper, but as a demonstration of academic honesty, as a means of showing the reader of a paper that, if I'm the author, that I'm honest, that I am willing to recognize and give credit to the sources from which I acquired the information that I'm presenting in my paper. Here I'm displaying a paragraph that I have excerpted from a student's work. The entire content of this paragraph is, I think, plagiarized. I don't know exactly the source from which the student acquired this information. I have a hunch, but I'm not positive. I'm going to show you a website that was published prior to this student's paper having been written. And the text in this paper is substantively the same as the text on the web page. But this is important. I don't know for sure that the student in my course duplicated the text or intentionally copied the text from the website. My student may have copied the text from another source that was also the source of information copied into the web page document. I'll show you what I mean. I'm going to flip to the web page. This is the CourseHero.com web page, or one of the pages on the Course Hero website. Course Hero is a repository of student writing, ostensibly for the sharing of academic knowledge. And I'll leave it to you to interpret what that really means. But in this paper, there's that is available through a public URL. The paragraph begins, "Going back to the Middle Ages, Scotland has a fascinating history, steeped in deep traditions, family values, wars, and mystery." I'm going to flip back to the snippet of my student's work. "Dating as far back as the Middle Ages, Scotland has an enthralling history, immersed in deep traditions, family values, wars, and secrets. Scotland is a country that occupies the northernmost third of Great Britain." The web page continued, Scotland is a country that occupies the northernmost one-third of Great Britain. Scotland's southern border is shared with England and is elsewhere surrounded by the Atlantic Ocean. Going back to my students' work, Scotland's southern border, however, is shared with England, and whereas the remainder is surrounded by the Atlantic Ocean. And I could go back and forth for this entire paragraph. It's substantively the same between the document presented by my student is substantively the same as the document available through CourseHero.com. There are minor changes, a couple of grammar changes, some vocabulary changes, but the syntax, the order of the argument, or the order of the claims are substantively the same. And I don't know for sure whether my student copied the text from this Course Hero website, or if both my student and the author of the Course Hero document copied text from somewhere else, which, quite honestly, might have been copied from somewhere else. I don't know the original source. All I know is I received a document in one of my courses from a student that duplicated text that had been previously written by at least one other person. I'd like to move on now and show you another example. Here on this page, I've again highlighted some text that I consider to have been presented in an academically dishonest manner, as it plagiarizes text that was available on a website prior to my students having prepared the paper for my course. The text begins, "With the shift to Christianity in the 5th century, there came the establishment of monasteries, which were used as centers of scholarship and led to the blossoming of the insular art style." Looking at a web page on wikipedia.org, the Christianity of Ireland in the 5th century saw the establishment of monasteries, which acted as centers of scholarship and led to the flowering of the insular art style and its highly decorative illuminated manuscripts, metalwork, and stonework. Going back to my students' work, it had decorative illuminated manuscripts, metalwork, and stonework. So there's a repetition of the same vocabulary in roughly the same syntax. So the text is not copied from Wikipedia, but it is substantively duplicates the text that's on Wikipedia. So the student who wrote the text I'm displaying here has made an attempt to make minor changes to the text, just as did the student writing the paper about Scotland. On this page, the text, I found additional sections in the first half of the first paragraph, the latter half of the paragraph, and all of these items that I've highlighted are syntactically the same as text on a Wikipedia page. And I was able to easily find these by using a manual search in a public search engine, and the originality checking software that's provided by my university also identified these items as having been copied from, or I shouldn't say having been copied from, having close similarity to the text on Wikipedia. For the vast majority of my students, I have not observed plagiarism in their written work. However, I have observed a correlation. Students that are less prepared for in-class activities, that are less willing to share their knowledge of the assigned readings during class discussions, and students who are, I've observed, have been waiting till the last minute to prepare written work. It's with those students that I'm observing a correlation with plagiarism. So I'm wondering if maybe it's not that the students who have committed plagiarism in my classes are inherently dishonest. It's that they are not as well prepared to complete their formal assignments and therefore are looking for an easy way to write a paper by just taking someone else's words or ideas, putting them into their own paper, and then not giving credit to those sources. I'm not quite sure. It could quite possibly be that I have observed some of my students intentionally plagiarizing. But in either regard, whether it's intentional or it's inadvertent, my institution requires that I still acknowledge it as a violation of the institution's academic honesty policy, calling it what it is. It's plagiarizing someone else's work, and it's at that point that I work with the student and work with supervisory faculty to determine an appropriate response. Sometimes students are allowed to rewrite their work. Other times, the majority of times, the students receive some type of punishment, whether it's a grade reduction, maybe all the way to a grade of 0 for the assignment, to I have had students that had been charged with multiple counts of plagiarism across multiple courses and were then expelled from the institution. So the penalty for plagiarism at some institutions can be very severe. It's not just a mistake and the student is allowed to just allow it to pass and learn from it. We want students to learn from their mistakes, but when it comes to academic dishonesty and violating an institution's academic honesty policy, the repercussions can be rather sharp. In preparing this video, I looked at examples of plagiarism that I have observed over many decades. Most are not as clear-cut as the examples I've provided earlier. They're duplication of phrasing or duplication of a single sentence within a paragraph. But even those I've had to identify as having been presented inappropriately and at least had a discussion with the student and usually had some grade reduction on the assignment for having violated the institution's academic honesty policy. So the plagiarism can be a simple reuse of a phrase or a clause. It doesn't have to be substantive duplication of an entire paragraph, as I've demonstrated in this video. I'm going to put on my dad hat for a minute and just give you some life advice. If you find yourself up against the wall trying to complete a written assignment and you're considering reusing someone else's text and not giving proper credit to that source, I'm going to caution you to stop. It's better to submit nothing in most cases than it is to commit plagiarism. It was very easy for me to find the sources of these plagiarized statements. I found them using the originality software that my institution provided. But I could have easily found them with just a Google search. Just take some of the sentences from the text that I've highlighted, drop them into Google, and the Wikipedia page or the Course Hero page comes up. Faculty are getting pretty savvy at identifying plagiarism, and it's more difficult to pull the wool over our eyes than it used to be. When I was a college student, we had pencil and paper, and we didn't have personal computers didn't exist yet. We would toddle off to the library, read text on paper, take paper notes. Some of us had typewriters so we could type our papers, but for the majority of my college experience, I submitted handwritten papers. It was difficult back then for faculty to observe and to prove plagiarism. Today, it's really easy. If you found the information somewhere and copied it into your paper, we can probably find it also. So I caution you to think twice when you're up against the wall and you're trying to make the decision, should I reuse someone else's words, or do I have the time and the wherewithal to create my own original work? All right, I take off my dad hat now. And I want to encourage you to present your work in an academically honest manner. If your faculty member allows you to use quotations, use them as appropriate, as defense of the claims you're making. If you're taking a literature course or a sociology course, a religion, sometimes even a history course, that lends itself to quoting sourced information, go ahead. Use the quotation marks or the indented paragraphs and properly cite the sources. If you're not presenting a quotation, then the statements that you're making should be of your own original composition. Don't use someone else's words and present them as if they were your own. And that's really the secret to preventing plagiarism in your own work. Present your own. The text in your documents should be of your original composition, except for those quotations that are appropriate and allowed by your instructor. And the reason I say allowed by your instructor is I teach courses that don't lend themselves to quotation. I don't now teach literature courses or sociology or history courses that can encourage the use of quotations in student papers. So I tell my students, no quotations. All data presented in student papers should be paraphrased and the sources identified, whether exact and no reuse of exact wording, even with proper identification as quotations. So I think I'll leave it at that and just wish you the very best of academic writing. Bye for now.